In this video, I'm going to be explaining why it's perfectly normal for your little newborn to want to be held by you all the time and that you are absolutely not doing anything wrong. So stick around to the end of the video and I'll give you some tricks and tips of how to work around holding your newborn all the time. Okay, so let's start by being clear about when I'm talking about. So I'm talking about newborns. So those early few days and weeks where you may spend some of the time in the hospital and then getting settled at home. The first 3 months of a baby's life is often referred to as the 4th trimester, which I think can be a really good way of viewing it as the extension of pregnancy and the introduction and integration of your baby into the outside world that it really is. So let's start by talking about some of the cliches that may get said to you, which I will argue are pretty stress-inducing and unhelpful. And I'm going to start with an example from my own experience when I had my first daughter. So we were at home, she was a few days old, and someone, who shall remain nameless for the purpose of this video, had come to stay with us for a few days to do all of that really helpful stuff when you've got a newborn baby. Make endless cups of tea, help with dinner, tidying up, all really helpful stuff. The incident that I'm talking about happened really when my daughter was just a few days old and we were getting ready to have dinner. So I popped her down in her Moses basket that we had set up near the table and sat down to have my dinner. And of course, just a few minutes later, she started fussing. So I went over, picked her up, brought her back to the table and did the one-handed holding the baby, eating for my dinner. And what do you think that person said to me? I think you've probably guessed it. Ooh, she's got you wrapped around her little finger already. What? The idea that this little baby, just a few days old, is consciously manipulating me is just crazy. But that's the inherent implication in what that person has said, really with a very thoughtless, cliche, throwaway comment. But these sorts of comments are said all of the time. Spoiler alert! My daughter is now 5 years old and I can assure you she does not sit eating on my lap. So some other similar comments that I'm sure some of you might have heard or will hear. You're making a rod for your own back. They'll never learn to settle by themselves if you go straight to them. Or what a good, bad sleeper. And I do include good sleeper in unhelpful comments because I think it's dangerous to judge any newborn as a good or bad anything and put that generalization onto them. So firstly, let's talk about when these comments are being said. When you've just had a baby, no matter how your baby has come into the world, I think we can all agree it's an emotional and hormonal time that leaves even the most confident of us feeling a little bit unsure and uncertain. So it's only natural that we turn to those around us for advice. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I absolutely don't know what I wouldn't have done without my support network of friends and family to turn to when I was unsure. But I think the important thing is that we recognize that it is just that. It's advice that we can then take or leave or adapt however suits us. It's advice based on that person's individual experience. One cliche I absolutely believe in is that every child is different. So the circumstances of one parent will not be the same as another, or you may have friends who aren't parents, lots of different things that means that their advice may or may not work for you. It may also be that you're getting advice from someone from a different generation and things have changed slightly since then. And that comes to another point of people may just not remember. My oldest is only 5 years old and already trying to remember back to when she's a newborn is really challenging. And I've seen this with my own parents. They once said to me, so I am one of 4, and they once said to me that none of us ever had a tantrum. I'm going to go off on a little tangent right now just to say I don't really like the word tantrum because of all of the negative connotations. So let's say emotional outburst, which I think is more what it is. So they claimed that me and my siblings never had an emotional outburst. Now that was said to me whilst my daughter, who was 2 years old at the time, was rolling around the floor because she didn't want to get into her pushchair. She didn't want to be carried by me and she didn't want to walk. So you can see how I was in a particularly tough spot there. So she's rolling around the floor and it's very helpfully said to me that me and my brothers and sisters never had any tantrums. Firstly, not the most helpful thing to say whilst I'm living that experience, because it's inherently implying that I'm doing something wrong. And secondly, I don't believe it. I'm just going to come out and say it. I do not believe for 1 second that none of us ever had emotional outbursts. Just don't believe it. But are my parents lying? No. Their memory and their perception of what happened, which I can well believe, because of course biology has encouraged us to remember the positive experiences and to blur the slightly more negative experiences for our own survival. But the problem with them saying that we never had emotional outbursts in that context was it was inherently implying that I was doing something wrong. Anyway, for those of you with newborns, emotional outbursts are slightly further down the line, so let's get back to it. Let's put ourselves in the position of our newborn for a second. For 9 months, they've been snuggled and squished up inside the womb. It's warm there, it's dark there, they can hear the sound of the woman's heartbeat. It's snuggly, it's the only world they know. All of a sudden, they're in the outside world. It's brighter, it's louder, it's smellier. They have never before felt hunger. They suddenly feel hunger. Can you imagine what an adjustment that must be all of a sudden? So without any scientific studies or further information, it's intuitive to appreciate that newborns are going to feel more comforted the closer they can be to somebody. So being held in their arms where they can feel their warmth, their breath on their cheek, feel their heartbeat, skin to skin contact, all of those things are going to replicate the world that they know. A friend of mine once said that it seemed like her baby was physically trying to crawl back inside her because she wanted to be so close to her all the time. And actually, my friend nailed it right on the head there. In a way, that's exactly what your baby is trying to do. Recreate that world and comfort that they know. That's not to say that it will always be that way, but they've had 9 months of things being one way, and at this point, a few days or a few weeks of this new world. So you can see how it might take just a touch of adjustment. They are also being super smart and driven by survival. Our newborns are entirely dependent on us for their safety and survival. They are not at a stage where they can fend for themselves in any way, shape or form. So again, it's natural that they'll want to stay as close to us, the protectors, as possible. When you put them down, their evolved flight response is kicked in. They're laying there thinking, I'm here all alone. What's going to happen if a tiger comes to get me? It doesn't matter that there are no tigers in your home. Your baby's evolutionary brain does not know that. It's an instinctive response. So how do other cultures differ on that topic? Well, I could do another entire video on that topic alone, but I think one of the things that stood out for me the most when I was researching this video is the different attitudes of many countries when it comes to baby wearing, particularly across Africa and countries within Asia. Yes, baby wearing is becoming more popular, certainly in the UK where I'm from, but I would argue it's still slightly secondary. The first thing I thought about was my pushchair, and then I worried about the sling. In other cultures, the primary way of transporting your baby or caring for your baby or being with your baby is baby wearing, so with a variety of different types of slings. And based on what we've talked about, you can see why this would be really comforting to baby, because again, they're getting to be snuggled and safe and standing up with you for the majority of the time, rather than laid down, exposed on their own in a pushchair. So here's my take on it all. Hold them, cuddle them, go to them. As time goes by, they will adjust to their new, brighter, colder, smellier world. That will happen naturally anyway, but in the meantime, the more that we can comfort them and be there for them, the smoother that transition will be. They'll learn that their new world is safe because you've shown them that it's safe and you've comforted them along that way. In case I haven't done a good enough job of reassuring you, as you likely sit there for the 3rd hour holding your newborn baby, then in the description below there's lots of the studies and information that I read whilst I was creating this video, which I hope you find really helpful. But as promised, let's talk about how do you do that practically. Yes, even if you agree that the best thing to do is sit and hold your newborn baby for 16 hours a day, there are some practical considerations as well. Sometimes you just need to go to the toilet. So here's some hints and tips from my own experience. Number 1, put off until tomorrow what does not need to be done today. No one is coming round to your home with their 1950s Good Housewife magazine to tell you all the things that you've done wrong. So leave the washing up, leave the ironing. It'll still be there for you in a few weeks' time, I promise. Number 2, surround yourself with a support network that can help you with as many things as possible. Get mum round to come and do the ironing, get a friend round to hold baby while you go and have a shower, get a meal delivery service, anything you can do to take some of those other things away. Number 3, if there's some things that you need to do and you absolutely don't have any support to do it and they can't be left, it's the same concept. We can do baby wearing. I even perfected the technique of going to the toilet whilst wearing my baby. Seriously, it can be done. Number 4, for me this was a really important one. One of the kindest things I did to myself was accept that for these early days and weeks, they are not going to want to be put down. And in my case, it was particularly the case at night. My baby absolutely did not want to be put into this beautiful, very expensive side cot that I had bought. We decided to go another way and accept that for now, she wasn't comfortable in her cot, and so we took it in turns to sit up with her. So not sleeping, we would take it in turns to sit in the dark living room with her, holding her in our arms. I watched a lot of series at the time, and then we alternated throughout the night. So she slept throughout the night except for when I was feeding her, and in between we managed to get periods of sleep and weren't stressed about constantly trying to get to settle in her cot. And then gradually we'd put her down in her cot during the day for her naps, and she got used to it, so that then we were able to do it during the night. But in the meantime, it worked really well for us to just accept that's how it was and not have that added stress. Number 5, which kind of links to the previous one, be kind to yourself and to baby. My final cliche that I am going to say today is that time really does go so fast. I know it doesn't feel that way when you're tired and you're stressed and you're trying to get things done, but speaking as the mother of a 5-year-old where cuddles are in much shorter supply, these days will pass, so enjoy them while they last. As the weeks go on, you'll likely find that some routines start to evolve, and I use the word routine very, very loosely when it comes to early days with baby, but there'll be some slight more predictability of the day. And when that moment comes, feel free to check out some of my longer baby sensory sessions, which will really allow for some beautiful bonding time with your little one. Hit subscribe so you'll see the new monthly themes as they're released. I'm Lisa and you've been watching Wriggle and Roll.